I am so glad you convinced me that the family car should be the Defender 110. It is so beautiful inside. It's so comfortable and it just feels indestructible.
Yes, it really is. I've been waiting a long time for the new model to come out. The Defender 110, I'm telling you, it's my favorite car of all times. It's my third one. You know, I have stories of going off-road. The guy managed the group. He was like, what are you doing in this beautiful car? I'm like, I'm going off-road. He's like, are you sure? Because you can use one of ours. And then they look like Mad Max cars. I'm like, no, we're going to do this. And he was shocked.
Wow. Well, it's great because the Defender has been reimagined for 21st century adventure, and its unparalleled off-road ability as well as its robust interior are invaluable whether you're headed towards uncharted territory or just a weekend of exploration. The Defender 110 tackles challenging surroundings with absolute confidence. The SUV conveys strength outside and in, featuring peerless technology like an intuitive driver display and an award-winning infotainment system. That's my favorite part, to keep you connected no matter where the journey takes you. Adventure is unique to everyone, and so is the Defender. Choose from the two-door Defender 90, the four-door Defender 110, or the larger Defender 130 with the ability to seat up to 8 passengers. You'll find uncompromising performance in all three. So pack up and go even further with the Defender 110. Learn more at LandRoverUSA.com/Defender.
Sometimes it takes a different approach to help you unlock your true potential. Capella University's game-changing FlexPath format helps you learn at your own pace and fit earning a degree into your life. From before you enroll to after you graduate, you'll be supported by people who are invested in your success so you can pursue your goals knowing that help is available if you need it. Imagine your future differently at capella.edu.
This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is the James Altucher Show on the Choose Yourself Network.
So thanks for listening to a very special or experimental podcast of mine. We're going to do an experiment today, but first, this entire podcast really started as an experiment about 2.5 years ago. I figured how many people who were personal heroes of mine in every area of life could I just pick up the phone and call and have them answer any question I have for them. So people ranging from Mark Cuban to Coolio to Amanda Palmer to Ariana Huffington to various astronauts. I just wanted to pick up the phone and talk to them. So that was an experiment, still ongoing. It's working out pretty well. I'm really having such a fun time. But now I wanted to try something new. I wrote a post a couple of days ago about minimalism and what I really thought it was. I don't really like when a lot of people who call themselves minimalists are just talking about not having a lot of possessions or, not, living off the grid. And I don't really relate to that as minimalism. So I sort of view my own lifestyle as very minimalistic, and I wrote about that, and I got, I would say 90% positive reaction, but then about 10% extremely negative reaction. So I first also want to introduce the producer of my podcast. She has been incredibly helpful in booking all of my guests, helping to edit these podcasts, helping to write about them to everyone. So Pamela, welcome as now a guest on the podcast. Or a guest host, actually.
Thank you, James. Thank you.
Maybe describe a little bit what you do for the podcast. And then what I want you to do is, I want you to play the devil's advocate to my post on minimalism. And I want you to not only ask me the questions people were asking me on these, different comments, but just play the devil's advocate. Hit me with the hardest questions, and I promise I will answer all of them completely honestly.
Okay, so I have to admit, people...
By the way, I interrupt a lot
no,
on podcasts.
I know that. First, people are going to think I'm an asshole. These questions are coming from a lot of online, LinkedIn, your website, Medium, pretty much everywhere that you post. You're all over the place, so we have lots of comments. But you said also to introduce myself. So what I do for you is I help book your guests. I research people. I love researching people. I feel really lucky that this job lets me kind of dig into people's biographies and find great people for you to interview. So I'm really excited to be here.
And you do a great job at it.
Thank you.
Also, you book, you're hardcore the way you book guests. Now, since you've started, I'm doing almost all the podcasts with guests in person. And usually I'll be like, oh, okay, if you don't want to do in person, we'll do on Skype. You're always like, you even push back at like, the most famous billionaires. No, you have to show up at this studio or James won't interview you. And they show up.
Yeah.
So I'm really amazed. That was an experiment too.
Well, I'm surprised, really happily surprised that when you just ask for something, the worst someone can say is no, but they're still interested. So, they could say no, but most are saying yes. So that's great. But okay, so we want to jump into some of these questions.
Well, first I'll describe the post just in case somebody didn't read it. So I'll describe it. It was basically about a year ago, I threw out almost all my stuff, or gave away almost all of my belongings. But then I realized it was only even though I had like 30 garbage bags full, it was still only a fraction of my possessions, because you still have, everything from sheets to paperwork to furniture to computers to all this stuff. So recently I actually went a different approach. I asked a friend of mine to go to a house I had upstate that I was renting, shut down the house. Like, I ended the lease. She threw out everything. I wouldn't let her be sentimental for me at all. Like, one time she called me up and said, hey, your diploma is here. You sure you don't want me to at least keep your diploma? I mean, you worked really hard for it. And I said to her, I've worked much harder for other things since then, so just throw out the diploma. Like, I don't care about it. And she had all sorts of things like that. But ultimately, and then I also gave up a lease here in the city and threw out everything. So what I was left with were 2 bags. One bag with clothes, about basically 4 or 5 outfits for the week, and it fit into one. Even it's so small I could even carry it onto a plane. Like, I wouldn't have to check it. And another backpack where I put my computer and my iPad, and that's basically it. So, and I gave up that lease, so I had no apartment, and I'm not using Airbnb. I'm not staying in hotels. I've been actually experimenting with just staying with friends, and the results have been really nice. So I literally have no belongings, no address. I go wherever I want. I have, but I even was saying, I don't view that as total minimalism. If you're angry, for instance, you're not minimalist because you're carrying that in your bag. If you have too many goals and they're creating anxiety for you because you're not achieving your goals, that's in your bag. If you're feeling possessive or feeling like you need to, control a situation or a relationship, even that's not minimalism because you're still holding that in your bag. So what I'm really trying to do is, in every way, even with my thoughts, view experiences as more important than material goods, or material goods that I want, or material information that people think is important. Like, I'm not reading the news or the gossip columns or anything like that. Just reading books that I love in the bookstore, by the way, because I don't carry around any books. All my books are on my Kindle app, rather. So that's kind of the introduction to what that article's about. There's more to what I think minimalism is, but let's go into some of the negative reactions. There was a lot of positive reactions, just to be fair. Most of the reactions were like, good for you, good luck, whatever, and then more positive or more negative. Let's go into the worst, most negative reactions, plus any questions you have.
Well, also, I think it's important to note that the title of the post was How Minimalism Brought Me Freedom and Joy. So in a sense, it's kind of like you're threatening people's sense of freedom and joy, because what you're doing is so opposite.
Although I say this is just for me.
Right.
Like, other people have freedom and joy from other things. For me, I like to just pursue, and I don't even want to put myself opposite anyone. I like to pursue what I love and not have anything holding me down. And I don't mean that in a, responsibilities way. Like, I'm responsible for my children who live with my ex-wife. I'm responsible for a business, and I'm not, shirking on my responsibilities. But for me, freedom is to let go of anything I want to, even thoughts that I want to possess, or anger or fear or anxiety. And part of that for me is not being attached to any of my belongings, not being sentimental about anything, because we all die eventually, and all the sentimentality I either have to outsource to my children, or I don't know, nothing. Like, people just carry stuff around for generations, and it's just all this useless garbage. So I wanted to get rid of all of that, and I did. For the first time in my entire life, I have never had so few belongings and so few responsibilities, except for the ones that are really important to me.
So, okay, then one of the things that everyone is asking, or the people who seem to care about you the most, is what's wrong? Is everything okay? Are you depressed? So let's start there.
Yeah, it's funny. So many people popped up messages like saying, hey, if you need someone to talk to, my phone's always open to you. Or if you need a warm meal or shelter, please contact me. And maybe they think I've gone broke again because I've written repeatedly how often I've gone broke in my life. But things are actually great. I don't need to cry on anyone's shoulder or anything. This is actually what I wanted to do. So, but I don't. Why do you think that's the natural reaction of people, to think that I'm depressed or that something's wrong? Maybe because that is what depressed people do sometimes. I don't know.
Maybe it could just be some people are just naturally sympathetic and concerned. It could just be who they are. Maybe less of a reflection of you, but more of a reflection of themselves.
Yeah, and I'm grateful for everyone who offered something, but not that I didn't need anything, but I did take people up on stuff. So if someone, some friends of mine said, "Hey, just stay here tonight," I surrendered to whatever was happening to me at the moment. So if someone said, "Hey, I'm not going to be around for a few weeks, take my apartment," I took it. Or if someone said, "Hey, I'll take you out to dinner," I took it. Why not? Particularly if it's a friend I wanted to reconnect with. That was great for me. So I enjoyed that part of it. But I definitely am not depressed about it. In fact, it's given me more things to be grateful for and more experiences to have just doing this, and even in just the past few days.
Okay, so then a question from LinkedIn, so for example, just now you said if someone invited you to dinner, you did it. If someone invited you into their home, you went ahead and took up their home, that offer. So are you a freeloader? That's one of the things people want to know.
I mean, maybe, but if someone offers something, it's not like I've asked anybody for anything. If someone offers something, does that make me a freeloader? Plus, I don't need to, be a freeloader. Everyone knows I could just, either rent another apartment or stay in an Airbnb or, do whatever I want. I just didn't want to do the year-long lease thing again. And I don't want to own. I've written repeatedly how I don't want to own a house. I don't mind spending a little bit more for a place to stay because I know the cash I save on not committing it for 20 years in a house or even a year in a lease, I can put to work in other ways. I think the best investment always is in yourself, which is what I'm doing. And in terms of being a freeloader, no, because people know that I don't really need them to, give me a jacket or anything like that. And I don't think I'm imposing on anyone. I didn't ask anybody for anything, so no.
So another thing is, do you think that anybody could do this?
No. I think, for instance, when I first had children, and I was married, I couldn't do this. You have to have. I'm still responsible for my kids. I see them as much as possible. I support them. I'm going to see them today, or tomorrow. I spend a lot of time. I talk to them every day on the phone. But I think when you first have children, it's probably impossible to do this. I think when you first have a job, when you're younger, you can either go all in on this before you have any responsibilities. You could travel the world or whatever, which is not something I want to do. Or you're beginning responsibilities with a job and a family, and then you probably can't do this. But I think as you get older, it's. I don't think everybody should do this, but I think it's worthwhile to understand that you have choices, and choices are experiments. So let's say I'm driving into the city. I could either take the bridge or the tunnel. those are two choices. But they're also experiments. I can take the tunnel one day, and I could take the bridge another day, and I could see which one got me to my location, my destination faster. So even this is an experiment. It's not, so it's something that I could decide to do for a while, and then also I have the freedom to not do it. So it's worthwhile understanding that you can always, no matter where you are or what situation your life is in, you could always turn your choices into experiments. And that's really what I'm doing now. I'm not saying I'm doing this forever. It's just an experiment right now.
Well, that's interesting because I know one of the things you said when we opened the podcast is that you've been doing this for 2.5 years, this experiment, and it's still going well. So I'm wondering, at what point does an experiment become permanent? Or for you, at least?
Well, I think an experiment should never become permanent. Think about a zoo. So what kind of animals are in a zoo? What's the most fierce animal in a zoo?
A lion. Okay,
so a lion's a great example. A lion in a zoo has a routine that it does every day. The lion keeper feeds it at the same time, however many times a day. The guests of the zoo come in and look at the lion and say things, and the lion's walking around. And then the lights go out on the zoo at night, and the lion goes to sleep. So that hardly seems to me like the king of the jungle. I mean, the lion is the top. Before humans sort of dominated the earth, the lion is the top of the food chain. But when you relegate it to having a routine in a zoo behind a cage, it's no longer the king of the jungle. It's just like a completely defanged animal that's useless. So I think having too much of a routine, no matter what, no matter who you are, turns you into that defanged lion instead of the king of the jungle. So you should always experiment. You should always try new things. Even when I'm staying from Airbnb to Airbnb, I'll go to different areas, or I'll try different types of Airbnbs. I'll travel around. I'll do all sorts of things, sometimes super cheaply. I mean, since I threw everything out, I haven't spent any money either. So it's not like being a minimalist has to be expensive, although sometimes it's expensive, sometimes it's not. But I think there's ways to experiment within experiments to shake up the routine.
So with not buying anything, does that mean you just genuinely don't want anything? You don't desire anything, or you do and then you resist it?
Yeah, I try to check myself. Like if I pass a store and say, oh, that's a nice shirt. Well, I already have enough shirts. I don't need another shirt. Or if I get a shirt, this has not happened recently, but another time I did this, I would pick a shirt to throw out. Everything has to fit within my one bag of clothes. Or if I see a book I like in a bookstore, I'll sit in the cafe of the bookstore and read the book. Unfortunately, this is the way that bookstores are going. I'll also download the book onto my Kindle app on my iPad. It's unfortunate for the bookstore, but I'll buy a coffee and something in the bookstore where they make huge profits more profits than they make on the book. So I don't feel like I'm ripping off the bookstore, but I'll sit there and read the book I like. I still appreciate hardcover books. I just don't have enough room in my bag to carry them around.
So one of the things you mentioned in the post was about...
and I just want to answer. What else could you possibly want other than clothes to wear? And we need computers now to kind of stay connected, and a phone. What else is there?
Well, quantity is certainly something people think about.
The quantity of what?
Well, options, variety, different for a girl maybe, or a guy, depending on your style, different choices for outfits, or a variety of restaurants you can eat at, or...
I have that variety. Mm-hmm. I eat at different restaurants, so...
Let's also look at some of more of the comments that people had. So people are really upset with you. Some people think you're being really selfish, thinking only about yourself, not thinking, they say you're a bad father. They say you're not thinking about anyone else's interest.
Well, more than 50% of America is made up of divorced parents. And so it's not like divorced parents all live with their children. But the key is, usually the average, I think, is a divorced parent sees their kids every weekend or every other weekend. I do that as well, one or the other. And I also try whenever I can during the week. I talk to them every day. This has nothing to do with minimalism. And I didn't leave my situation. Again, there's lots of reasons people get divorced. I didn't leave my situation because I was like, F you. I'm going on my own now. I'm going on my, Crocodile Dundee walkabout. So take care of the kids and see you later. Like, I pay money to support the kids, and I see them as much as possible. I talk to them as much as possible. Whether I had possessions or a place or not has nothing to do with how much I see my kids. It's just how the divorce was settled, how I see my kids. So I'm curious why people think minimalism has to do with not taking responsibility for your kids, unless maybe they had an experience where someone left them, perhaps, and and just took off and gave up responsibility to the kids. Maybe there's some projection happening, but I don't want to say I don't know these people. But certainly reducing possessions and reducing in my mind the things that I'm anxious about has nothing to do with not supporting my kids. If anything, I say, if minimalism requires no responsibilities at all, then I'm not a minimalist, because I'm responsible for my children and I see them as much as possible and I worry about them and I think about them and I love them. And so, yeah, I hope I'm not a bad father. Maybe I am, but at least not for any minimalist reasons.
Have they read your post?
They haven't read my post. Although I did tell them I have no formal place to live. So they have to tell me in advance if they're coming to visit me in the city, because then I have to figure something out. But, and they were curious, like, what's going on? They thought also maybe I'm depressed or something. I won't say which daughter, but one of my daughters cried because she thought something was going wrong. And I had to explain to her, no, this is all fine. This is good. And then I arranged to see her the next day. So we're going to play tennis tomorrow.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
So, because some people might say that putting that, doing this sort of lifestyle does put a burden on your children, making them think about when they have to come see you, what if they need you right away? Because a lot of people don't have that choice with their kids of scheduling time to see them. So do you think that those people who are claiming that this isn't feasible for for divorced parents, even as you say, do you think that they're wrong, or you think that this is just what works for you?
A, this is just what works for me right now. And B, yeah, they're wrong, because has nothing to, my kids could visit me and I'll figure it out. Or I visit them, which is what's happening, and I still figure it out. So either way, it has nothing to do with whether I have a steady lease. They just can't send me a physical package. There's no place to send me a physical package. So, and I don't know what else. Like, I saw a couple of comments all related to my, oh, he must be a bad father. Really, I'm showing my kids also an example of there's alternative ways to live your life and find happiness. It's not necessarily grow up, go to school, own a house, have a white picket fence, have a family, and then they repeat. Like, there's lots of different ways to live life and be happy. And so I hope I can even teach them that.
And you're teaching them how to deal with fear. I mean, you said one of your daughters cried. She was afraid for you. And
yeah, and I think she was also afraid of change in her life too, and that what this might mean. But I assured her, by actually making plans to see her and talking to her every day, I assured her, nothing's really changing at all. So, I mean, things change a little. Like, she's not going to go back to my old place, but other than that, she'll get used to change with me, but I'll still see her just as much, if not more.
What's the likelihood that, next week you'll have your own apartment?
0. Just because I really, for a long time, I really hated the process of owning, and I realized I hated the process of renting as well. And if you're not owning and renting, you're limiting your choices. But I found that there's other choices. So, for instance, Airbnb is not that much more expensive than renting, and I could experiment with different places, and there's no security deposit or 3 months rent or credit checks or whatever that you have, or meeting co-op boards that you have to handle. Like, renting is really stressful also. And hotels are often not much more expensive than renting, particularly in Manhattan. So, and particularly with Airbnb coming in as competition, hotel prices have gone down. So, and by the way, occasionally friends with great apartments are leaving town for months at a time. So again, not everyone has that option, and I won't always have that option, but sometimes you have that option.
Yeah, well, some people, probably listening to this are thinking, my friends wouldn't let me stay with them for that long, this and that. And it could just become a jealousy factor of, you have great friends and not everybody has that.
Well, that could be true. Not that I have better friends than other people, but also I'm a little older. So maybe when I was in my 20s, I didn't have these kinds of friends. But after, for 20 years, if you do favors for people without any expectation back, then suddenly you realize, oh, I've created all this goodwill, and your friends actually want to help you if you've spent a lot of time helping them. So I'm doing people a favor sometimes by letting them help me for the first time in decades. So that, and not that I need the help, it's just that it's nice to, again, experiment with different places. Because I only have one bag of clothes, it's easy for me to enter someone's apartment and leave it without any disruption. It's not like I'm carrying furniture around. It's not like I'm carrying other people around. It's not like I'm carrying, a whole life's worth of belongings around. I'm not spending any money on storage. I have minimal clothes. Heck, I'll buy the food for the refrigerator so I don't take up any, of their consumption energy. And people don't even know that I'm there.
Someone else asked, what if you fall in love? How can you have this lifestyle?
That's a good question. And it's related to the fact that, honestly, I haven't talked a lot about my personal life. I mean, I used to always talk about my personal life on posts. Maybe I spoke too much about it, but I tend to be very honest about everything that's going on in my life. But I never want to say anything bad about anyone either. The only person I ever say anything bad about in my writing is myself. And so I'm kind of leaving my personal life out of my posts lately, and people have been asking me questions, but there's no way I can really respond without, maybe saying, I don't know, things that are none of anybody's business for other people. But I will say, if I am in love and in a relationship, probably the situation will be a little different for me, and this experiment will be over. I'll try a new way of being minimalist, but I'm not at that point.
I mean, that makes sense. You always say that your life changes every 6 months.
My life has, for decades, my life has changed every 6 months. And so the key is, good things and bad things always happen to you, no matter who you are. You could be the richest man in the world. You could be the happiest man or woman in the world. You could be the poorest man or woman in the world, the angriest. But your life, bad things are always going to happen. Like a relative might pass away, or you might lose a job, or someone might leave you, like in a relationship, or whatever. And all of these things have happened to me repeatedly. But happiness, or I don't want to use the word happiness, well-being is not about the things that happen to you. It's always your choice how you react to it. So I think that's 90% of well-being is how you react to a bad thing. Like, there's all sorts of studies that show if you lose a leg, you'll be sad, of course. Oh my God, I just lost a leg. This is the worst thing ever. But then people tend to go back to their baseline of happiness. They figure out ways to deal with it. I mean, I was having dinner with a friend of mine last week who has half of her leg gone since childhood. And she says she was so young when she got half her leg. She was like 4 years old. It was an accident. She was so young when it happened that she's never not been happy because of it. She's never been sad because of it. And now she does all of these charity events, and she goes to hospitals and visits kids and tells them they can have just as happy lives or even happier lives because of their misfortune with the leg or the missing limb. And so I think no matter what, I mean, I'm not always, you can't always aim for happiness. I mean, for 4 million years, humans aimed simply for food. And then only in the past 100 years, we have this whole kind of, pop happiness culture. But, you can aim for well-being. And I think, that's sort of the key to this, is just making the choice at any point. Okay, this bad thing happened to me. I'm going to find out what I can be grateful for in this situation. I'm going to be healthy now. Nothing can stop me from being creative every day. I could still do this podcast. I could still hang out with friends. And what else do you need after that? You could do all these things no matter what's happening in your life.
With your friend, that says a lot about loss in the sense that it really is in perspective. She didn't lose anything because she didn't ever recognize having it to begin with.
You think I should have her on the podcast?
Yeah.
She's actually really well known once I have her on the podcast. So I won't say who it is, but I'll have her on the podcast.
Okay, so I'm going to plug. Everyone will have to go to jamesaltucher.com to find out later
when she's going to be on my podcast.
There you go. So one of the things that you wrote in the post, you said, if you stretch beyond what is normal, you find out who you are.
Yeah, and I think this has come up in other podcasts that we've done too with different guests. But if you're just always in your comfort zone, if you're the lion always in a cage, you're never going to find out you're king of the jungle. So you have to know, you have to push your limits a little bit every day. This has come up actually in so many podcasts, like even with Anders Ericsson, who you actually booked. You went to college where he is the professor, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so he was the one who popularized, along with Malcolm Gladwell, the 10,000 hour rule. Like if you do deliberate practice for 10,000 hours, you could become the best in the world in your field. And his whole point is if you don't do deliberate practice, if you don't push yourself with like a teacher or a mentor or whatever, and then go beyond what you did the day before, you're actually going to get worse. Like there's no such thing as staying the same. You're going to either get better or you're going to get worse. And that's why he points out in medicine, sometimes people who have been doctors for 30 years, you think they're super experienced and they're the better doctors, but often they're far worse because they haven't been improving. So you have to kind of drill down and see how they've been improving themselves to really decide if this person should be your doctor. So I think it's another example when you do these experiments with your life, and again, everything's an experiment, nothing's permanent. I may decide 2 weeks from now things are completely different. Who cares? But if you're not pushing yourself every day to be a little bit more than what you were doing the day before, or challenge yourself a little bit more, you'll never really know what your limit is. Your limits could be so much further out than you thought, but you'll never know.
It's interesting though, because it's almost like you minimize everything that seems like the basics in your life so that you can maximize your podcast and the things that you really enjoy. You're reading, 3 to 5 books a week. So you're able to maximize all the stuff that you really love by minimizing the things that you don't really care about.
Right. And when people say, oh, I've had this criticism before, oh, maybe he had money so he can do this. I don't have time to do this. I have to work from 9 to 8 or whatever. But when I've written so many times about making money and then going totally dead broke. And this has happened to me more than once. And the last time was just a few years ago. And I started from scratch again, pretty much when I started kind of this direction in my blog. And opportunities happen. If you every day exercise the idea muscle and write down 10 ideas a day, and that doesn't mean you have to, I need a computer to do that, or I need a whole network of friends, or I need a lot of money. To write 10 ideas a day, I do it on a waiter's pad. I don't have any, extra props. And then you just start creating opportunities for yourself when your creativity muscle is exercised. And again, it's a way of challenging yourself, which ideas you'll pursue, how you'll pursue them, what you'll pursue on the side while you're doing your job. And I talk all about this in either my blog or my newsletter. All the different ways people can do side gigs and how they can make the transition from a job to more freelance type of employment. Everyone I speak to who goes from job to more, not necessarily freelance-ish, but having more freedom in their employment, whether it's on the job or having multiple streams of income, they're all feel greater freedom and well-being. Well-being for me is 3 things. Improving my relationships with friends every day, getting more competent at something every day. So, that's why we're doing this experiment with the podcast. That's why I experiment with my writing and so on. And then finally, improving your sense of freedom. So, for me, throwing everything out was an experiment, and also trying to throw everything out of my brain. So I'm not reading about the election. I'm not reading about Kim Kardashian. I'm only reading things that I want to read. I'm only listening to things I want to listen to, not what other people tell me to read or listen to. So this, for me, increases my freedom right now. I don't know how it'll be tomorrow. And I don't know if it'll work for anyone else. I never recommend for anyone else. I always say, or I want to say, advice is autobiography. I can only say what I'm doing, and then maybe other people can try or not.
Well, so people are watching and listening to what you're doing. And one of the things that they want to know is, it's funny because you're saying that they don't have to take your advice. And one of their questions is, why should I take your advice? Which is kind of interesting because you tell them sort of not to anyway.
Well, yeah. So A, you don't have to, although you can say, okay, maybe he's got a lot of experience in A, B, and C, so I'll take his advice on that. But I saw that comment. I think that guy assumed if I have no possessions and no address, then I must be broke and homeless. And it's like almost like this, the average American right now has a negative savings rate. So if you throw everything out and have very few possessions, you're doing the opposite of the average American. So of course, a lot of people are going to be, hey, wait a second, that's not correct because he's doing different than me. And the reality is I don't want to have a negative savings rate. I like to have freedom and cash in the bank and, be able to move around and be able to do what I want to do. So, and not be beholden to debt or mortgage or credit card debt. So I think if you go against kind of their version of the American dream, then I must be either depressed or homeless or mentally ill, or maybe I went broke again, which I didn't. This is totally just a choice. And so maybe that's how they're justifying not taking my advice, but that's an incorrect way to justify it. They could just decide not to take my advice anyway because it's not a way they want to be, but there are some things I still might be an expert on, and they could say, okay, I'm going to read him for this, but not that.
Well, you bring up an interesting point about knowing why you do anything. People are asking, why should I take your advice? And you're saying they don't have to, but you know why you're doing something. And some people don't know why they do something. And that's what's so important about Choose Yourself, is asking that question of, why am I doing this?
Yeah, like at the end of the day, I don't like that saying, oh, we can all die tomorrow, because the odds are, if you just look at it, the odds are you're not going to die tomorrow. You've been alive for 20,000 days, 10,000 days, whatever. So odds are you're not going to die tomorrow. You didn't die the prior 10,000 days, so why should you die tomorrow? And everyone says, oh, live life like you're going to die tomorrow. If I lived life like I'm going to die tomorrow, maybe my day would be completely different. But I actually know I'm going to probably be alive tomorrow, so I have to act accordingly. But I do try to live life as if everyone else is going to die tomorrow. So if I meet somebody and I think, oh my gosh, they're going to die tomorrow, I'm going to treat them really well and with a lot of respect, because they're probably going to die tomorrow. I'll pretend to myself. And so, again, that's just the way I do things. That's how I like to treat people and live my life. And anybody else can do something different. They can, you can choose. Just don't make choices that you know are bad for you. So for instance, I'm in New York City, if someone has a destination wedding in Hawaii over a holiday, I'm not going to go. And they put a lot of pressure, like, oh, you have to go. Everyone goes to these destination weddings and these destination weddings. I hate those because it takes me out of my life. I can't see my kids. I don't want to fly 12 hours to Hawaii. I'm just giving this as an example because this actually happened. I lost these friends. A friend of mine a good friend of mine had a destination wedding in Hawaii on a July 4th weekend. I preferred to spend it with my kids in New York, and I didn't go, and they've never spoken to me again. So, because they wanted to control my choices, but I can't. I have to always choose what makes me happy, or else I'm going to resent the person who made the choice for me. I'm going to resent myself. I'm not going to have a fun time. I'm going to waste 3 or 4 days of my life. Maybe I'd get sick because I was on a plane for 16 hours. Who knows? If you don't consistently choose yourself and you let other people make the choices for you, you're just going to be miserable all the time.
Right. And it's interesting because if you would have went to that wedding hypothetically and you still had those friends, who knows how many more choices they would have made for you after that.
Yeah, you can't maybe then I'd have to go to, wherever they live, like in California now, I'd have to go to every family event or else, what you can argue is they probably weren't my friends to begin with. Although I don't like that type of argument either. They certainly were my friends. They themselves made the choice, anybody who doesn't come to our wedding and help us celebrate this great event in our lives is not going to be our friend in the future. So they put a kind of line in the sand maybe, and which a lot of people do. Your boss will tell you, oh, you have to do A, B, and C, or you're fired. Well, you shouldn't listen to that type of boss because you should try to have more freedom even on the job. Like you don't have to quit your job to have freedom. You just shouldn't associate with people who are going to try to make choices for you because eventually those choices are going to be not so good for you. And again, like I said, you're going to end up doing a bad job. You're going to be resentful of the boss and yourself. You're going to be unhappy. You'll get stressed. You'll get sick. And part of minimalism is limiting the number of people who can choose things for you. That doesn't mean quit your job. It means get a job where you have choice instead of other people just choosing for you. So minimalism is again, as much as possible, being able to choose for yourself.
And to bring it back, not just minimalism. It's I think really the main point of your post was freedom and joy. And this is just how you achieve it.
Yeah, and maybe it's not the minimalism side that's freedom and joy, but just having the choice to do what I'm doing. This is a weird thing. Like I felt weird. I'm 48 years old, and suddenly I'm thought, oh no, what will people? I got a little worried for a little while. Are people going to think I'm homeless and broke? Which is what happened, and because I've never done this before, and I got a little scared. But if you don't, and I always say I don't care what people think of me, but the reality is I do a little bit, just like anybody does, and I guess I did care, which is why we're even having this podcast because I wanted to address all these questions that came up. I do care a little bit, and I didn't want people to think I'm homeless and broke because I always say I do these things and it's worked out really well for me, and it still is.
Right. So you're homeless, just not homeless and broke. And that's a huge distinction.
Homeless by choice.
Homeless by choice. It's funny you said that last part about caring a little bit, because one of the first things I was actually planning on asking you was I was going to say, people want to know things about you. And my question is, do you want to answer them?
Oh, yeah, I always answer anything, First off, when I first started writing my blog, let's say it was like 6 years ago, I had a friend call me and say, are you about to kill yourself? Because I was just revealing so much. And then other people would ask, I would see on Twitter, people would say, this is like watching a train wreck as it's happening. And but the reality is, I think most people are kind of afraid to be authentic about what's going on in their life. So if they're having a hard time, they're embarrassed about it, which I've definitely been in the past. And I can't say I'm completely, I'm not like a glass house where I reveal everything. I don't believe in radical honesty because I don't think you should say things that will hurt other people. So like I said, I only hurt myself. I'll never say anything that hurts anyone else, but except for maybe, I don't know, Donald Trump on occasion. But and even then, whatever, I don't care about the election. But I think whatever you ask me, I'm willing to answer. Not that I'm so important, but because I'm trying this experiment and people are commenting, I figured let's give this a try and answer the questions people had. Again, not that because I'm so fascinating or anything, but just trying this experiment and seeing what people think.
It's interesting. Some people read the post and they were so angry that afterwards they thought it was your fault that they read it. So they wrote, why did you write this?
Yeah, because I think they thought I had ego in writing it. And I don't know. I like to write. I love to write, and I love to write stories that I know most intimately. So I don't know about, elves and hobbits, but I do know about myself. So this is what I can write about. And I try to write it in a storytelling fashion. This is the latest story that's happening to me. So I wrote about it.
I like that, so
why did they read it? If they don't like me so much, don't read it. Like, it's always interesting to me. It's like that 9-year-old girl in Pennsylvania who reported on a murder story and everyone like trashed her. and saying, oh, 9-year-old shouldn't be covering like a murder story. And she was so eloquent. Let's get her on the podcast. You know the story I'm referring to? No. Oh, look it up. 9-year-old girl in Pennsylvania reports on murder story. Let's get her on the podcast if we can. She might be too big. She's like bigger than getting Barack Obama on a podcast. But, she went on Good Morning America and everything. But she made another newscast, which is like, hey, yeah, I'm 9 years old. Don't listen to me if you're so upset. Like, that's it. So I agree with her. I'm learning from her.
That's awesome. She's choosing herself at 9 years old.
Totally. I'm really like a big fan of this little girl.
So the other question is, have you cried since, writing this post? Because I think that's something people want to know is are you actually okay?
First off, I don't think crying and being okay are related to each other. People cry for many reasons. If I watch Schindler's List, I'm going to cry automatically. Like the little girl in the red dress. I've seen the movie 100 times. Automatically, I will cry at that moment. Obi-Wan Kenobi getting killed by Darth Vader. I will cry at that moment every time I watch Star Wars. Have I cried since throwing away all of my possessions? Yes, several times. I tend to cry at a moment's notice. So, in the past year, I've had ups and downs plenty of times, just like anybody. You can't avoid bad times. Life happens. And again, it's your choice whether you view it as good or bad. So I always allow myself, a day or a couple hours or a couple of days to say, okay, I'm going to feel badly about this. And then I'll cry. And then I'll get back to, trying to be physically healthy, trying to be, emotionally healthy by connecting with friends, trying to be creative every day, trying to find the gratitude in the most difficult situations. And then I tend to bounce back extremely quickly and even thrive from it. Not every time, but most of the time. It works for me. I don't know if it works for anybody else. But, in the past, let's say 6 months, I've lost 2 relationships that were very important to me. And again, I've cried about those. And again, I tried this as an experiment, not because I'm depressed. I'm actually very content with my life now and more content since I did this. But certainly thinking about, allowing myself to cry does allow, if steam builds up, you either kind of have to let that steam vent a little bit or the house blows up. So I don't want to blow up. I rather than being a maximalist and holding on to the things that make me sad, sometimes it's good to let the steam out a little bit and then move on and say, okay, I let that out. I'll tell you another thing I did in the past day that was really refreshing. There were 2 people who were really angry at me from the past 5 years that I haven't spoken to maybe in like 3 or 4 years, both of them. And so I wrote to both of them and said, here's why I always liked you, or in one case loved you, and I'm really sorry how things happened, and you don't have to respond. I just wanted you to know that. And so one person responded, one person didn't. And so now maybe I rekindled that friendship, and we'll see. Again, those were experiments. There's nothing wrong with trying things like that. I have no ego about it, about writing to somebody who might hate me. And because eventually it doesn't matter. We're all, at some point we do die, whether it's tomorrow or another point, and all those things don't matter. So being a minimalist to me also means stop holding on to, these old grudges that in the long run are meaningless. And a great example is Bill Gates and Steve Jobs. I don't know if you ever read Walter Isaacson's biography of Steve Jobs.
No.
It's a great section towards the end. I mean, Steve Jobs and Bill Gates hated each other. Like they were mortal enemies in the 90s. They were suing each other. They were slandering each other. They were fighting all the time. But, people get a little older and life happens. Bill Gates is retired and now is a very charitable guy. Steve Jobs was on his deathbed. And so Bill Gates, unannounced, was walking in Steve Jobs' neighborhood, I guess in Palo Alto, just walks in through the back door, sees Steve in the living room, and they just hung out and spoke for the afternoon. And that's what ends up happening. Like things kind of mellow out in the long run anyway. And so why not increase the speed of that? Like maybe they could have done that in the 90s instead of waiting, another 20 years to do that. And so I thought that was a nice story in Walter Isaacson's book. And I think, again, that's giving up on all of this past, releasing your history doesn't mean you forget the history. It just means you release it because it's not ultimately that important.
It's interesting how you mentioned the speed of things, because you did also mention that you threw away everything, or you started to throw away everything a year ago. So I think sort of in the same sense that you say doing things each day that improve 1%, it doesn't have to be overnight Bill Gates and Steve Jobs are friends, or overnight you throw everything away. It's
right. Like it could be, again, like let's say you are already a minimalist and you've thrown things out and you've kind of cleared your brain of a bunch of things. You could say, oh, well, you still have this resentment or anger for this one person who left you or fired you or treated you poorly. Again, releasing that in some way, either by reaching out to them, or you don't even have to reach out to them, just releasing it internally. I think always having a sense of surrender, like, okay, this happened and here I am. So everything that happened before led to exactly where I am now. I'm choosing to be happy, so it couldn't be that horrible what happened to me before. I mean, people could be happy anywhere. You could be in solitary confinement and be happy. It's just your choice. So, and part of that choice involves releasing all the times you either made bad choices or other people made choices for you that you didn't like, where resentment sort of built up from that. So again, releasing history is part of being a minimalist.
So 2 final questions just to wrap it up. What would be the first step, for someone who's listening to this and says, James, I really like what you're doing. What's the first step to minimalism?
I don't know if again, we've been talking about minimalism as an ism, so there's no like one defined path, but maybe a very first simple step is do one thing a day to either reduce something you're holding on to physically or emotionally. So let's just say physically is the easiest. Let's say every time you move, you carry around the same set of books and you never look at them, but you're just carrying them around and you're never planning on reading on them, but you think, oh, maybe I might just take one book and donate it to the library or give it away or give it to a friend or put it on your sidewalk because eventually someone will pick it up. Or another great one is all of the letters you've ever gotten from your bank, don't save them. They're online at the bank. Everybody always saves all their paperwork, but everything's online now. So throw out all the paperwork in your house or throw out extra sheets or towels for guests that you're never going to have. Or if emotionally, what I try to do is I'll look at emails I got 6 or 7 years ago that I never responded to, and I'll respond as if they just sent me the email an hour ago. Like, sure, I'll meet you for coffee, even if I didn't respond 6 years ago. Or look at your schedule and see the things you've agreed to in the next few weeks, and see something that you don't really want to do, like, oh, I agreed to dinner with this person, but I don't really want to do it. Just write to that person and say, hey, can't make it. Looking forward to seeing you some other time. And just, free up your time a little bit. There's all these different, or just simply make a list of all the things you could free yourself from. That itself is a first step. So you don't have to do them. Just make the list and be aware of them and notice them. So those are all first steps if you want to go down this path.
And then, someone who really is sitting here wondering, oh, I don't know, should I not? What's your advice to them?
Don't. I just am telling a story about what I'm doing and trying. It might work for me or it might not. Don't do it. Like, come up with your own experiments about your life and do those. Again, it's all about finding out who you are, what your limitations are, how far you can go, what's good for you and the people around you. Don't listen to me at all about it or take what you want.
It's great.
So, Pamela, thanks so much for being the guest host. I think we're going to try this every couple of podcasts. We'll try this format. We'll have different guest hosts, or Pamela, you could come on again. People should tweet if they enjoyed having Pamela on as the guest host. And thanks again. And thanks for producing this podcast.
Thanks, James. This was fun.
For more from James, check out The James Altucher Show on the Choose Yourself Network at jamesaltucher.com and get yourself on the free insiders list today.
AI might be the most important new computer technology ever. It's storming every industry and literally billions of dollars are being invested. So buckle up. The problem is that AI needs a lot of speed and processing power, so how do you compete without costs spiraling out of control? It's time to upgrade to the next generation of the cloud, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, or OCI. OCI is a single platform for your infrastructure, database, application development, and AI needs. OCI has 4 to 8 times the bandwidth of other clouds, offers one consistent price instead of variable regional pricing, and of course, nobody does data better than Oracle. So now you can train your AI models at twice the speed and less than half the cost of other clouds. If you want to do more and spend less, like Uber, 8x8, and Databricks Mosaic, take a free test drive of OCI at oracle.com/advance. That's oracle.com/advance. oracle.com/advance.